Well, good morning. Good to see you all. A little different seating arrangement today due to an event that we have coming up next week. So we're doing a trial run to see how it all works. So a little something different, a little more legroom for you. We're starting a series today on thinking, which will be more interesting than I just made it out to be. So we'll get to that. We'll get to this question. But wanted to draw your attention to something that's coming up next weekend. There are certain truths in life, and one of them is you just can't have enough Josh Clark. So anyway, and this was the poster that was in the B Hall, which was closest to my office. So you'll see all these posters up around featuring the cast, and I want to draw your attention to the dates of this coming up on February 8th, 9th, and 10th, all at 7:30. Tickets are $5 for students and seniors. General admission is $5. So if you got a picture of Lincoln, you are good to go. And I want to show you a little teaser, if you will. So enjoy the next 6 minutes.
Come, Lenya, let us pray. Pray for deliverance. Dear Lord, who art in heaven, we are in Koyenjikov, and we aren't in trouble.
Koyenjikov, I like it. It's exactly how I pictured. A quiet, pleasant village, not too large. The perfect place for a new schoolmaster to begin his career.
We are a simple people, Lord.
Did you happen to see 2 dozen sheep?
2 dozen sheep?
Yes, there are 14 of them.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, if you see them, would you deliver a message?
A message for the sheep.
Yes. Tell them the shepherd is looking for them, and they should tell you where they are, and then I'll come and get them. Thank you.
We know not what we do, because we know not what we do.
Wait, your name, please.
Snetsky.
And your first name?
How soon do you need it?
Never mind, forget your first name.
Oh, I did.
I'm not Stolchinsky. I'm to be the new schoolmaster.
Is that a fact? I am very honored to meet you, Leon Stepanovich Stolchinsky. I am something, Snetsky. Will you be staying tonight?
You don't seem to understand. Koyenjikov will be my new home. I'm going to live here and teach here. I am, if I may say so, an excellent teacher.
Oh, they all were. They came by the thousands, but not one of them lasted through the first night.
You mean you've had thousands of teachers?
More. Hundreds. We're unteachable. We're all stupid in here in Koyenjikov. There isn't a town or village more stupid than all of Mother Poland.
Russia.
Whatever. All good people, mind you, but not a decent bread among them. Fish. Fresh fish for sale. Nice fresh flounder and halibut. Good piece of carp for lunch. Good morning, postman. Do I have any mail?
I'm the postman. I have all the mail.
Are you telling me that every man, woman, and child...
All stupid, including me. Talk to me another 10 minutes or so and you'll begin to notice.
I was hired by Dr. Zubritsky to teach his young daughter.
Teach his daughter? Impossible! The girl is hopeless. 19 years old and she just recently learned to sit down. She's hopeless. She doesn't even know the difference between a cow and a duck. Well, not that it's an easy subject, mind you.
Something is up here. I thought nothing of it then. But when I first saw the advertisement, I did notice that every word was misspelled. Now, I'm sure Dr. Zubritsky will explain it all to me.
Then I'm in good health.
Oh, the best of health. You'll live to be 80. I'm 79 now. Well, you've got a wonderful year ahead of you.
Nikolai! He's here! He's come! He arrived about 2 minutes ago. He's young, he looks strong, determined. Maybe this one will be the one, Nikolai.
Calm yourself, Lenya. Who's come? Who will be our salvation?
The best young teacher in all of Russia!
The new teacher is here!
Thank God the teacher's here!
How can we help you?
Well, there are a few questions I wanted to ask you first.
Young man, have you ever heard of the curse of Koyenjikov?
I can't say that I have.
Well, 200 years ago, a curse was put on this village that struck down every man, woman, child, and domestic animal, including their ancestors for generations to come, leaving each and every one of them, and you'll find this hard to believe, with no more intelligence than a bump on a log.
My initial impulse was to panic. Even my secondary impulse was to panic. To educate is one thing, to break curses is another.
Master Tolchinsky, may I introduce our daughter, Sophia Irina Elenia Zubritsky.
Miss Zubritsky. We must begin as soon as possible. Not another moment should be lost. I will return tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. Oh, forgive me, sir. I was just passing by. May I introduce myself?
I know who you are. You're the new school teacher who has come here in a pathetic attempt to break the curse of Koleshnikov. The curse can only be broken if you educate her, which you can't, or if she marries me.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand?
Don't ask me that question anymore. Leon, I cannot be taught.
I don't like the way this is going. Maybe this one will be our salvation.
What's wrong with your cow? He's tired. I've been milking him since 4 o'clock. Upside down? You get a little more cream that way? Cream! Fresh cream! Drinking right from the spigot. 2 kopecks a mouthful. Cream right from the udder. Fresh cream!
All right, there you go. February 8th, 9th, and 10th, 7:30. Right here. Excellent. All right, there he is. One more time, Josh Clark, just because. There he is. All right. So, we're going to start a 3-part series today, which will go over the next couple of months here and there, about thinking. And thinking doesn't sound like something that's all that interesting to think about, but it actually is really important because you do it all the time. And oftentimes you do it without, dare I say, thinking. So this series is intended to help that along. So we're gonna call it How to Think, which is a little pretentious, but it's not what to think. It's not indoctrination. It's a way of thinking about our thinking, which is something that you're going to do and use for the rest of your life. So we're going to start off by answering 3 questions. The first one is, who is Tim Piazza? Now, you don't know Tim, so I'm going to introduce him to you. Tim, in high school football player. He promoted sports for children with special needs. He met his girlfriend, his high school sweetheart, as they both worked through the Teen Prevention Education Program, which focused on responsible sexual decision-making. College, going to major in mechanical engineering. He was a part of an organization at Penn State University which raised money for children with cancer. And in terms of his career, he was going to pursue making prosthetic limbs for children and soldiers. So this is a guy who would say he's got his act together. He's smart, he's focused, he's others-centric, he's got a plan, he's moving. So that's to answer the first question. The second question is, why is he dead? And so we're going to start here. Going into his sophomore year, Tim was going to pledge at a fraternity house on the campus of Penn State University. So I'm going to read you some of that story, and it goes like this. About 3 p.m. on Friday, February 3rd, so it's not this February 3rd, just in case you're wondering, all right? Tim Piazza, a sophomore at Penn State University, arrived at Hershey Medical Center by helicopter. 18 hours earlier, he had been in the kind of raging good health that only teenagers enjoy. He was handsome, a red-headed kid with a shy smile, a hometown girlfriend, and a family who loved him very much. Now he had a lacerated spleen, an abdomen full of blood, and multiple traumatic brain injuries. He had fallen down a flight of stairs during a hazing event at his fraternity, Beta Theta Pi, but the members had waited nearly 12 hours before calling 911, relenting only when their pledge looked dead. Tim underwent surgery shortly after arriving at Hershey, but it was too late. He died the next morning. Tim consumed 18 alcoholic drinks in less than 90 minutes. Now, if you were to ask Tim before that evening, said, Tim, 18 alcoholic drinks in less than an hour and a half, how's that going to go? And Tim would have said, badly. There's no part of that that has an opportunity for success. Yet, that's exactly what happened. And Tim, at that event, never got his own drink. All drinks were given to him by older fraternity brothers who Tim was trying to impress enough to be accepted into their fraternity. So I'm going to read you kind of a breakdown of what happened on that night. So I want you to listen to this. Why is he dead? That's the question that we're wrestling with. This is the question of what were they thinking as this went on. So I'm just going to read it straight as we go here. And a lot of this was captured on security cameras. There's a lot of footage. So this is not this testimony versus this testimony. This is what happened. It said, on the security footage, a fraternity brother named Luke Visser points towards the stairs in an agitated way. Greg Rizzo clearly hears the fall and goes to the top of the steps to see what's happened. Later, he will tell the police that he saw Tim, quote, face down at the bottom of the steps, end quote. Jonah Newman will tell the police that he saw Tim lying face down with his legs on the stairs. Rizzo sends a group text, quote, Tim Piazza might actually be a problem. He fell 15 feet down a flight of steps, hair first, going to need help, end quote. 4 of the brothers carry Tim up the stairs. By now, he has somehow lost his jacket and tie, and his white shirt has ridden up, revealing a strange dark bruise on his torso. This from his lacerated spleen, which has begun spilling blood into his abdomen. The brothers put him on a couch, and Rizzo performs a sternum rub, a test for consciousness used by EMTs, but Tim does not respond. Another brother throws beer in his face, but he does not respond. Someone throws his shoes at him hard. Someone lifts his arm and it falls back, dead weight, to his chest. At this point, the brothers have performed a series of tests to determine whether Tim is merely drunk or seriously injured. He has failed all their tests. The next day, Tim's father will ask the surgeon who delivers the terrible news of Tim's prognosis whether the outcome would have been different if Tim had gotten help earlier. And the surgeon will say unequivocally that yes, it would have been different. That earlier is right now. While Tim is lying here, unresponsive to the sternum rub, the beer poured on him, the dropped arm. A brother named Ryan Foster rolls Tim onto his side because he has to catch him because he almost rolls onto the floor. Jonah Newman straps a backpack full of books to him to keep him from rolling over and aspirating vomit. This, in the party world, is known as jansporting. It just simply keeps people from rolling onto their back and vomiting and choking on their own vomit. So a bit of a backpack public service, if you will. 2 brothers sit on Tim's legs to keep him from moving. This is the moment when Cordell Davis arrives and attempts to save Tim's life, only to be thrown against the wall by Newman. Davis disappears from the video in search of an officer of the club. By now, Tim is thrashing and making weird movements, according to the grand jury presentment. Daniel Casey comes into the room and looks at Tim and slaps him in the face 3 times. Tim does not respond. 2 other brothers wrestle near the couch and end up slamming on top of him, whose spleen is still pouring blood into his abdomen. Tim begins to twitch and vomit. At this point, Joseph Ems appears, quote, frustrated by Tim, according to the grand jury. With an open hand, he strikes the unconscious boy hard on the abdomen where the bruise has bloomed. This blow may be one of the reasons the forensic pathologist will find that Tim's spleen was not just lacerated, but, quote, shattered. 45 minutes later, Tim rolls onto the floor. The heavy backpack is still strapped to him. He rolls around, his legs moving. He attempts to stand up and manages to free himself from the backpack, which falls to the floor. But the effort is too much and he falls backwards, banging his head hard on the hardwood floor. A fraternity member shakes him, gets no response, and walks away. At 3:46 in the morning, Tim is on the floor, curled up in the fetal position. At home in New Jersey, his parents are sleeping. Across campus, his older brother Mike has no idea that Tim is not safely in his bed. At 3:49 a.m., Tim wakes up and struggles to his knees, cradling his head in his hands. He falls again to the hardwood floor. An hour later, he manages to stand up and staggers toward the front door, but within seconds he falls, head first, into an iron railing and then onto the floor. On some level, he must know that he is dying. He stands again and tries to get to the door. His only hope is to get out of this house, but he falls head first once again. At 5:08 a.m., Tim is on his knees, his wounded head buried in his hands. Around campus, people are beginning to wake up. The cafeteria workers are brewing coffee. Athletes are rising for early practices. It's cold and still dark, but the day is beginning. Tim is dying inside the Beta House, steps away from the door he has been trying to open all night. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, another pledge wanders into the living room where Tim is now lying on the couch groaning. And the pledge watches as he rolls off the couch and onto the floor. And again, he lifts himself to his knees and cradles his head in his hands. As if he really had a bad headache, said one of the fraternity members. The pledge lifts his cell phone, records Tim anguish on Snapchat, and then, while Tim is rocking back and forth onto the floor, leaves the house. A few minutes later, Tim stands and staggers towards the basement steps and disappears from the camera's view. The house begins to stir. Some fraternity members head off to class, and in the fullness of time, they return. And then around 10 a.m., a brother named Kyle Pecci arrives and asks a pledge, Daniel Erickson, whatever happened to that pledge who fell down the stairs last night? They come across Tim's shoes and realize that Tim still must be somewhere in the house, so they look for him. The search reveals him collapsed behind one of the bars in the basement. He is lying on his back with his arms tight at his sides and his hands gripped in fists. His face is bloody and his breathing is labored. His eyes are half open, his skin is cold to the touch, and he is unnaturally pale. 3 men carry him upstairs and put him on the couch, but no one calls 911. Fraternity brothers with garbage bags appear in the footage and start cleaning up the evidence. Brothers try to prop Tim up on the couch and dress him, but his limbs are too stiff and they cannot do it. Someone wipes the blood off his face, and someone else tries, without luck, to pry open his clenched fingers. Clearly, the brothers are trying to make this terrible situation appear a little bit better for when the authorities arrive. But they do not use their many cell phones to call 911. Instead, one brother uses his phone to do a series of internet searches for terms such as cold extremities in drunk person, and binge drinking, alcohol, bruising or discoloration, cold feet, and cold hands. Where is Tim right now? As his body lies on the couch, are his soul and self still there in the room, or have they already slipped away? He has put up a valiant, almost incredible fight for his life, but by now he has lost that fight. When he was a little boy, he used to make people laugh because he got so frustrated with board games. He didn't like playing those games with their rules and tricks. He loved sports and running and playing with his friends at the beach, but his body is cold now, his legs and arms unbending. Finally, at 10:48 a.m., a brother calls 911, perhaps realizing that it would be best to do so while the pledge is technically still alive. One of the questions that was asked by the Piazza parents was this. Shouldn't they know the consequences of hazing? It's really like, how does this happen? This was not an immediate incident, and that was that. As you heard, it was a long process. So the question then becomes, how does this happen? How does a kid like Tim, with all of his others-centered aspirations, a good head on his shoulders, good family, smart kid, so how does he end up another fraternity casualty? How does that happen? One of the reasons why I used this example is because Tim does not fit what we generally think is the type of kid who ends up in this situation. He does not check any of the boxes. So because of that, we have to think differently. So I would submit to you the main reason why this happened is because it's very hard to think for yourself. And in part, why does this happen? Because everybody in this story was really only thinking about themselves. So why is Tim doing all this? I mean, at some point you go, this is a lot of drinks. What made him overlook that? If you walked down the hall after chapel and saw somebody laying there with a bloody stomach in the fetal position, you would probably go, we should probably do something about that. And yet nobody did anything about it. Why? Because what are they all thinking? If we report this, what's going to happen? We're going to get in trouble. And we don't want to get in trouble. Well, they all got in trouble. Lawsuits, jail time, grand jury indictments. It was a mess. Okay? It was an absolute mess. Here's the goal of this series. It's the first of 3 parts, but this is the general goal for everything. Just to try to give you some tools to examine your own thinking. We think all the time. A lot of it is unconscious, but we have to be people who think about our thinking. To think about our responses, to think about our words. So a lot of this comes down to just slowing down, thinking, listening more, talking less. But to be self-aware, I cannot impart to you the value and importance of being self-aware and honest about that. And so at certain times in this series, including today, I'm going to speak pretty bluntly. Because what we tend to do is to think, this is really good for somebody else. I'm asking you, I'm inviting you in to think about your own thinking on a variety of levels. All right? So to do that, we're going to start with an old guy. This is C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis had an ability to encapsulate big ideas in a small amount of words. And he talked about something in a book he wrote that came out in the late 1940s called The Weight of Glory, and he talked about something called the inner ring. The inner ring. So I'm going to describe to you in part what Lewis means by the inner ring, and then I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like. Okay, so this is what he said in the 1940s about wanting to belong. So he says, the inner ring is not even a formally organized secret society with rules which you could be told after you had been admitted. You are never formally and explicitly admitted by anyone. You discover gradually, in almost indefinable ways, that it exists and that you are outside it, and then later, perhaps, that you are inside it. There are what corresponds to passwords, but they too are spontaneous and informal. A particular slang, the use of particular nicknames, an elusive manner of conversation are all marks of the inner ring. But it is not constant. It is not easy when at a given moment to say who is inside and who is outside. Some people are obviously in and some people are obviously out, but there are always several on the borderline. There are no formal admissions or expulsions. People think they are in it after they have been, in fact, pushed out of it, or before they have been allowed in this provide great amusement for those who are really inside it. But this is where he gets all-inclusive. He says, I believe that in all men's lives at certain periods, and in many men's lives at all periods between infancy and extreme old age, one of the most dominant elements is the desire to be inside the local ring and the terror of being left out of it. What he's saying is we all want to belong. We all want to be a part of something. And when we are apart, we feel more important. I don't know anybody who really is excited about being a leader all the time. I don't know anybody who wants to be left out. Everybody wants to be a part of something, and that belonging is really powerful. Now, if the inner ring part didn't make sense, let's give you a more modern day example. Mean Girls came out 13 years ago, but I think it's still important because it's all about the inner ring. Now, if you haven't seen Mean Girls, here's a brief synopsis. A girl who has lived most of her life in Africa as being homeschooled by zoologist parents moves into a large suburban area and attends the local high school. And upon her first day in class, she doesn't know anybody. She's trying to figure out who these people are. And she's not used to having, if you will, a ring. And so she comes in and all of the local groups, all of the inner rings start sizing her up. and they start vying for her attention. And so a couple of kids who are in a certain group, almost a misfit group in some ways, kind of adopt her in, and then they tell her about this certain group. If you've seen the movie, you know them as the Plastics. The Plastics are the ultimate inner ring. There are only 3 people in it. The top is Regina George, and then her 2 lackeys. And so they have all kinds of rules, which they tell Katie on her first appearance with them. And so one of them, for example, on Wednesdays, we wear pink. And they take these rules very seriously. So seriously that even if you are the queen of the hill and you violate them, you will get kicked out of the group.
Regina, we have to talk to you.
Is butter a carb?
Yes. Gina, you're wearing sweatpants. It's Monday.
So?
So that's against the rules, and you can't sit with us.
Whatever. Those rules aren't real.
They were real that day I wore a vest, because that vest was disgusting. You can't sit with us!
These sweatpants are all that fits me right now. Fine.
I had to edit a little bit
You
here.
can walk home.
That's where you're going.
So the inner ring, the Plastics, you got to follow the rules, because the rules are where you get your power. The rules are where you get your identity. And even if you're the top and you violate those rules, even if you're being sabotaged by fellow members, you're out. But now, here's the other part of the story if you haven't seen Mean Girls. So Katie's friends, Katie is Lindsay Lohan, are trying to get her to infiltrate the Plastics because they want to see what they're about. So it's all about, don't become one of them, but just find out and then report back to us so we can essentially break them up. We can destroy them. And so Katie's like, oh, okay, I'll do that. But funny things happen along the way as she spends time with this group that she supposedly doesn't like and is trying to figure out, and she comes to a realization about 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Gretchen and Karen followed me around all afternoon.
So what are we doing this weekend? Yeah, what are we doing?
Oh, I have to go to Madison with my parents. What? We have tickets for this thing.
What?
Was I the new queen bee? I can try and get out of it.
Because I told my friend Janice I'd go to her art show.
We've had these tickets for months. You love Ladysmith Black Mambazo.
But she's my friend and I made her a promise.
I think Katie's old enough to spend one night on her own.
Art show, big party, she throws up in front of the guy she likes. It was a hot mess. Lying to her parents. But what she'd realized was, had I become that actually which I had set out to despise? What I actually did initially despise? Had I actually become her? And what she realized was, yeah, I have been. Because she wasn't self-aware. She wasn't thinking about what she was doing. So let's talk about belonging here. Belonging is really, really powerful because we all want to do it. So you have to understand this. We said earlier in chapel this year, like, technology is not neutral. When you use an app, that app is using you as much or more than you're using the app. Well, it's the same with our environments. Environments are not neutral. They impact how we think. I used to teach relationships back in the day. And so, for example, we'd be talking about dating and sexuality. We'd talk about boundaries. And let's say it was Friday. Friday afternoon, I usually had afternoon classes, so let's say it's 7th period. And I would say, all right, gang, we're not gonna discuss things here. I'm just gonna give you a few things to think about because I don't really want participation at this point. And so I would do that. I would give some thoughts. We'd say, hey, let's reflect on this, and then it's 2:55. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday. And here's why I did that. Because when you're talking about dating and sexual boundaries at a Christian school, particularly if you've been part of a Christian community for a long time, you know the right answers. You know what to say and how to say it to get your Christian school teacher, which in this case was me, to go, good point, well said. And I feel like a good teacher, they feel like a good student. But see, that didn't matter. What mattered was Friday night. Big difference between Friday afternoon and Friday night. Because now, if it's Friday night, and you're with that guy or girl that you really like, and they kind of like you, or if you're officially dating, and you're not in a Christian school classroom at 2:30 in the afternoon with a big moose of a teacher going, all right, y'all know the right answers? All right. Guess what? It's a different ballgame. These environments change, and we tend to change with them. And here's a big difference, expectations. Every environment you go in has expectations. Every environment you are in has expectations. This is why you'll find yourself acting differently around adults than your friends, or your parents and your friends. Oftentimes very different expectations. And we tend to play roles, and we slip into those roles very quickly and very easily. So when I was a junior, my junior year of high school, that was the year I thought, I'm gonna kind of let loose a little bit. So I had a friend named Dave. Dave was 2 years older than I was, still is actually, and we started hanging out. And so I was a big guy. I'm usually, everybody I know, I'm usually their biggest friend, right? And people have certain expectations of you. So now when you're at a party and you're a big guy, so my junior year, I was 6'3", 250 pounds. And so when you're a big guy like that, you're supposed to be able to hold your liquor, right? So as soon as I showed up, everybody starts, a la Tim Piazza, giving me drinks. But it wasn't little drinks. We weren't starting off with a little glass of Merlot, just to kind of take the edge off a little bit. Back then, they had something called California coolers. It was wine coolers, right? This is 1987, 88. They gave me a 2-liter bottle. That's 167.6 ounces. So everybody else is walking around with the silver bullet, and I'm walking around with a scuba tank. You just start drinking. And the more I drink, poor people are like, what's up, big fella? Right? Because we were in the buzz stage. We weren't to the I love you man stage. That comes a little later, right? We're in the buzz stage. And I just realized, this is going pretty well. And I'm feeling good. Like legitimately good. Like I'm holding my liquor, because big guys are supposed to. Then I sat down on the couch about 140 ounces in and went, oh, I don't feel so good. But now, big guy's supposed to be able to hold their liquor, right? So could I let people in on that? Nope. You gotta man up. You gotta rise up. And I was also the youngest guy at the party. I'm hanging out with everybody 2 years older than I am or more. I don't want to be the young, dumb goofball who's sitting over on the couch going, that's enough. I gotta play the part. So those were, I felt like, were the expectations. Did anybody say that to me? No. Was that stated? Might be a little contract we'd like you to sign here. Nope. Just kind of read the room. Now, every environment has expectations. It also has rewards and punishments. So, as the big guy in the party and I'm holding my liquor, that makes me cool. I want to be cool. Everybody wants to be cool. It's just a matter of on what terms. Everywhere you go, there's rewards and punishments. And they're not official. But you feel them. Right? You feel them. Especially if you tie your identity into it. Boy, you got to get that reinforced. You want that reinforced in a big, big way. And depending on the level to which you want to belong, you will pursue those rewards at great peril to yourself and overlook the consequences. And I mean, this is true of everybody. The part you have to go into, what am I looking for here? And you have to look at it, and I don't mean this after telling boozy stories from my high school years. You have to look at it with sober judgment. Here's what I mean. Is this environment that I'm going into, is this going to turn out well? Am I going to like myself after this? Is this something that I can be proud of? Is this something that my Lord would feel honored by? Is this something that my parents or people that I respect would feel honored by? And sometimes you have to say it out loud. Say it out loud has a lot of power. What are you looking for? What are you pursuing? And this could be good or bad. But you have to understand it's what's real as you go through this. And then here's a big one. Precedent. So I go to another Dave party. What do you think happens as soon as I come in the door? Here's your scuba tank, big guy. I didn't ask for that. That wasn't part of my plan. But I had shown them that, yeah, this is what I do. And I certainly played the part that I enjoyed it. Well, see, here's what happens. When you're with friends, you teach them how to treat you. You teach them what to expect of you. And they follow those expectations. And usually, they will escalate those expectations. And one of the truths is, you will not, in terms of precedent, you will not gain the respect of others by consciously disrespecting yourself. Does that make sense? You will not gain the respect of others by consciously disrespecting yourself in the process. So, for example, using the fraternity story from Tim, let's say he survives, he makes it, or it comes off okay, and he's accepted into that house. Now, I'm sure that house does some good things. They may do some charitable work, have some rules, have a framework that they operate in. But the entrance test to your inner ring tells you a lot about what the inner ring is going to be like. So if you have older brothers who have all the power, have all the influence, are going, how quickly will you degrade yourself to gain my approval? If that's the framework of the group that you're trying to gain entrance to, how do you think that's going to go? That doesn't end well. I remember, I used to have kids tell me a lot, this was the whole, I go to parties, but I don't drink. I said, okay. Kids used to tell me a lot when I was a teacher. Now I'm a principal, so I scare them away. But they used to tell me a lot, and I said, okay. So what are you doing at this party when you're not drinking? But, just kind of hanging out, and then they got very holy. Just well, I'm just there. Like I might even witness to people, right? Like they're just sitting over on the couch reading Galatians, and they're like, hey, how's your walk with the Lord, right? You want to talk, right? And they would say, maybe I could be a designated driver. And that was all true. But what it really was like, I kind of want to be there because